언젠간 알게 되지. 않겠어?
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel where I cover vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures. We're back again, and this time we're going to look at the Korean film Thirst from 2009. The film was produced and directed by Park Chan-wook and loosely based on an 1867 novel, Therese Raquin, which was written by Emile Zola. The film revolves around a Catholic priest named Sang-yeon, him volunteering to test an experimental vaccine, and the unexpected aftermath. Let's get into the vampire virus from Thirst.
갑자기 받은 휴가라 정신이 없었어요.
The movie begins with us being introduced to the main character Sang-yeon. He is a Catholic priest currently working at a hospital providing his services for patients. He is well liked but having doubts about himself and his faith. This is probably why he signs up for the medical experiment. Currently there is a new disease called Emmanuel virus, or EV for short. He is traveling to the FR Emmanuel Memorial Biochemical Labs in Africa, where the virus is most problematic. An older member of the order hints that strange things go on at the lab, but nobody knows exactly what they research there. He briefly stays at a monastery in Africa and hears a strange scream in the air. I wonder what that could be.
If you were to get infected during the experiment, all is lost.
When Sang finally arrives at the medical facility, the director of research explains what happens when someone is infected with EV. It is a leprosy-type virus. First, infected blisters will start to form on the limbs, then around the lips, eyelids, and inside the nose. Next, they continue inside the body, through the respiratory and digestive tracts. The blisters cluster together, get bigger, and burst open. If the lesions form in the muscles, they can form large ulcers and hemorrhage. If it reaches the internal organs, the person will start coughing up a lot of blood and eventually die of excessive bleeding. There is currently no cure. He agrees to the risks and is given the vaccine along with 50 others. At first, everything is going well and it seems to be working. Then he starts developing the blisters all over his body. His condition gets worse until one day, while playing his recorder, he begins to vomit blood, which is one of the final signs. He is rushed to receive medical help, but there's nothing they can do. The vaccine obviously didn't work. Right before he dies, they try giving Sang a blood transfusion, but he dies anyway. The doctors accept he's gone and put the sheet over his face. But then they see movement. Somehow, Sang is alive and praying. He was the only person out of 50 participants who survived. 6 months later, he leaves the biolab and his face is still covered in bandages from the blisters. Outside, a small crowd has gathered. Since he was the only one out of 50 volunteers to survive, people have started to think he's some kind of chosen one. The fact that he's a priest probably lended to this theory. The legend grows quickly, from him being the only survivor out of 50 volunteers to being the only survivor out of 500, and he just goes along with it. While doing his normal work at the hospital, a mother comes crying to him and wants him to pray for her son, so he does. After praying over the man, he realizes they used to be childhood friends, and Sang goes over to their house for a game night and begins spending time with the family. Also, the crazy thing is, after Sang prayed over Kang, his cancer went away. Sang later mentions hearing about a couple of other people that he prayed for being cured as well, so he might actually have healing powers. Priest came back from the dead and can possibly heal people. Definitely drawing some parallels to Jesus here. It's never fully confirmed whether he can actually heal people or it was just a coincidence. It might be up to us to decide whether we think it's real, or whether we believe like his followers do. So what exactly happened to Sang, and why did he come back to life? It turns out the answer is the blood transfusion. That's what saved him, or rather, changed him. The blood must have been taken from a vampire somehow. Maybe they perform other experiments in the medical facility and that's how they ended up with the vampire blood. Regardless how they got it or how it was contaminated, it was given to Sang and saved him from EV and brought him back to life. The medical team seems to have no idea what he's become. One of the first things that Sang discovers is that he can no longer eat normal food. When he tries to, it looks like it causes him pain and he immediately spits it out. He must feed on only blood now. While doing his work in the hospital, he has to pray over a hit-and-run victim, and we can see how distracted he is by the blood. When no one's looking, he quickly licks some of it off of his hand to taste it. Eventually, he finds a suitable way to feed. There is a coma patient in the hospital and Sang feeds from his IV tube. After he starts doing this, Sang is disgusted with himself and tries to take his own life by jumping out a hospital window. He only succeeds in getting his head stuck in a windshield after plummeting multiple stories. The fall did not hurt him at all. Didn't even break a bone. These vampires are obviously very resilient, almost indestructible. When Sang doesn't feed for a while, the blisters on his face and body return. He will even begin to vomit blood again like he did right before he died. So the vampirism virus, or whatever it is, did not cure his EV. It just suppresses it. As long as he feeds, he will be fine. But if he doesn't, the EV will return and kill him. Vampires are probably immune to most viruses and diseases like in other cases. But since Sang had EV when he was infected, it may have caused a unique mutation. This reminds me of the kids that had measles in season 5 of American Horror Story. A child became a vampire while they were sick with measles and subsequently had to feed to keep the measles symptoms from manifesting. As far as his weaknesses, Sang eventually finds out that he cannot go out in sunlight or it will burn his skin. One time he falls asleep in front of a window, and in the morning he wakes up to his skin burning and smoking. They don't seem to actually catch fire in the sun, just smolder and smoke. He probably didn't notice the sun burned him right away because he was completely covered in bandages when he left the experiment. After discovering these strange abilities, he confides in the elder priest Ro from the church, and it sounds like this man has almost raised Sang. He knows about everything that's happened to Sang and even allows him to feed on his blood. But this is secretly because Ro wants to be turned. He is blind and believes that if he was turned it would heal his eyes, which there's a good chance it would. But for now, Sang says no. Ro keeps begging throughout the movie to be turned, and eventually Sang kills him, and then yeets his body halfway across the ocean. He throws him so far I was waiting for a little twinkle in the sky like when Team Rocket gets blasted by Pikachu. At first, Sang becomes quite disoriented when getting used to his new abilities. His hearing and smell are greatly improved, and eyesight so good he can see microscopic organisms on his skin. Yeah, I don't want vision that good. Eventually, Sang starts getting used to being a vampire. He's also becoming quite close with his childhood friend's wife, Tae-ju. This family is extremely odd. A quick summary of what's going on with this family is that Kang is basically a child trapped in an adult's body who is constantly babied by his mother, Miss Ra. The mother is very overprotective of Kang and basically forced Tae-ju to marry Kang. Apparently when they were younger, Tae-ju's family paid money to stay with Miss Ra, but then they disappeared out of nowhere, leaving Tae-ju behind, so she basically feels like a prisoner. Almost every night she breaks out of the house and runs around the streets at night just for a chance to be free. Sang and Tae-ju begin to have an affair and he reveals that he's a vampire. He does this by drinking blood in front of her, which makes her freak out and run back home. There, Sang is already waiting for her on the roof, hanging upside down with his feet like a bat. He slips through the window and tries to talk to her, but has to leave when the family begins yelling for Tae-ju. While walking down the street, we see him punch a light post and break it. Not long after, Tae-ju comes around to the idea of Sang being a vampire. She's actually very curious about it. She wants to know what it's like being a vampire, and can he turn her into one? He doesn't give an answer to this. They meet up on a rooftop and he shows her drinking blood again. She wants to know if he can bend a coin, and he effortlessly rips the coin in half and tosses it away. She then wants to know if he could jump off this building. He picks her up and jumps a few stories down onto the next roof and jumps a few more times like he's on one of those frogs from Spy Kids 3. He is able to jump at least 50 to 100 feet straight up in the air. That vertical jump is beating any basketball player. At the time, even Sang seems kinda surprised by this amazing feat. While carrying Tae-ju home, he sees some marks on her legs. She claims that Kang abuses her sometimes. Sang then has the idea they should kill Kang so they can be together. They end up taking him fishing at a special restricted spot because Kang's uncle is a police officer and he lets them fish there. Anyway, they throw Kang off the boat and drown him. When they fall off the boat, it causes a bunch of stuff to fall overboard and a fishing hook goes right through Tae-ju's ear and then gets ripped out. The police come, but before leaving, Sang throws a large rock on the body so it won't float to the surface. At first, Sang and Tae-ju are happy, but that doesn't last. First of all, Miss Rock confuses Sang for her son in her hysterical state and has a stroke or something, leaving her basically a vegetable. She can blink and is still aware, but can't move or speak. They continue to look after Miss Ra because it's basically Tae-ju's mother, but she becomes haunted by the image of Kang after he drowned. This messes with Tae-ju's mind and almost drives her crazy. I'm not sure if the ghost of Kang was real or not, because one time Sang sees him as well, meaning it could be the actual ghost of Kang rather than something in Tae-ju's head. The worst part is, Sang finds out that Kang never actually abused Tae-ju. It was all a lie. She actually made those marks herself to frame Kang. Sang is horrified because he's done everything in his power to not kill, resisting the urge constantly. He killed Kang for her, and it was a lie. This all culminates in a huge fight and Tae-ju saying she wants to die and be with her husband, so Sang strangles her to death. Miss Ra, while laying on the ground, witnesses the whole thing, and Sang very quickly regrets his decision and then tries to turn her into a vampire. He attempts to cut his arm to give her blood, but his skin heals so fast he can't even get any blood out. He finally manages to get some blood to drip from his wrist and lets it go into Tae-ju's mouth. After only a few seconds, her body twitches and she comes back to life, eagerly drinking the blood from Sang. All of her wounds, including the cut on her ear from the fishhook, heals immediately.
Happy birthday, Tae-ju.
Unlike Sang, Tae-ju quickly takes to being a vampire and enjoys it. We see her admiring her appearance in the mirror. Possibly the vampirism has made her look better in some way, like skin complexion. Very quickly, Tae-ju begins to crave blood and murders her first victim. She lies down on the side of the road and then steps out in front of a car. This man was working the case of Kang's death. When she returns home, Sang can smell that she killed someone, and he's very angry. He has done his best to not kill. He's even found a new way to feed by helping people who want to take their own life. That way they get what they want and he gets to feed. Tae-ju, on the other hand, has taken on the persona of the stereotypical murderous vampire, and to her, humans are nothing but food. Common story in many vampire shows and movies. There's always one vampire that doesn't kill or only feeds on animal blood. Like the Cullens from Twilight, Edward from Daybreakers, or Stefan from the Vampire Diaries. Tae-ju argues they are no longer human and should embrace what they are. While having this argument, they're leaping across rooftops with such ease it's almost like flying. These vampires can jump like the 2003 Hulk. At least one time in the movie when Sang jumps, it looks like he is in fact flying, so I'm not sure if they can fly or not. He stops chasing Tae-ju and hides on the side of the building and catches her by surprise, grabbing her leg, causing her to smash her face into the building and break her nose. Sang tells her they need to feed without killing and fixes her nose. Kinda weird they can jump off a 10-story building and not break a bone, but if you hit your face on a wall then you can break your nose. A little inconsistent with the bone strength, but that's alright. Sang and Tae-ju are still living with Miss Ra and looking after her. Tae-ju hasn't been allowed to feed on fresh blood, so she started to develop EV. Turns out when Sang made her into a vampire, he also gave her EV. That means they're both permanently infected with this deadly virus, and the symptoms will return if they don't feed on blood regularly. According to Sang, women cannot usually get EV, but because her blood is now intermixed with his, she's been infected. Because of her condition, Sang finally decides to give in and let her feed on fresh blood, and her skin returns to normal within a matter of seconds. When Tae-ju tried to feed on some non-fresh blood, it made her throw up. However, later, they're both seen drinking blood from a bottle, meaning the blood does not have to be fresh. In some movies like the Vampire Chronicles, feeding on old blood or dead blood can be fatal to a vampire. That doesn't seem to be the case for thirst, so I'm not sure why Tae-ju was having trouble feeding on this non-fresh blood. Miss Ra's family comes over for another game night for the first time after Kang's passing. While playing the game, Miss Ra ends up scratching some letters into the table and chair using her finger. She can barely move her finger, but just enough to spell, killed. The family realizes that Miss Ra is saying that Sang and Tae-ju killed her son. Now the vampires have no choice but to kill them. They close the blinds and begin the killing spree. When one of them is running away, we see some bodies already stored in the closet, probably from Tae-ju. She's relentless, and again Sang tries to stop her, but he can't. Now she's just as strong as him. There is one woman remaining, and Sang kills her before Tae-ju can. Probably a good thing for her considering Tae-ju grabbed a giant saw. He tells Tae-ju they have to run away now. The police are going to search the house after 4 people go missing. They drain the bodies of blood so they have something to feed on while they're on the run and bring Miss Ra with them. After leaving, we see the last girl that Sang killed is not actually dead. He just made it look like he fed from her, but he didn't. I guess this was the last good act he could do. Before leaving town, he makes a quick stop back at the place where his followers camp out to break into a woman's tent, then leave. He made it look like he was trying to assault her, and I think he did this purposely to ruin his image as a saint or chosen one so that people would no longer worship him in any way. He knew after all that he's done, he's not worth the praise, and he was never special to begin with. They continue driving out of town and Tae-ju falls asleep. When she wakes up, they're at a cliff with no structures around, and I think he threw the car keys away. Sang has decided he can't live like this. Tae-ju realizes what he's doing and tries to hide them in the trunk, but he kicks the trunk off. She then tries to fight him, breaking his arm quite badly, but he throws the trunk lid into the ocean so they have nowhere to hide. Tae-ju has one last attempt to live and tries to hide under the car, but Sang moves it. She accepts defeat and sits on the hood of the car with Sang. She also puts on the shoes that he gave her when he first found her running through the streets at night. They drink the last of their blood and wait for the sun to rise. He wanted to be with her forever, but not like this. Remember that Miss Ra is still in the car, and right before the sun rises, Sang puts on some music for her and allows her to watch them die. He most likely did this because he felt bad for what he did to her son under false pretenses. The sun rises and they don't catch fire, but smoke until they are nothing but ash. Miss Ra looks quite pleased. That's the end of Thirst. Now we can go over the vampire virus. First off, the origin. We have no idea where this vampire virus came from or how old it is. Priest Rowe does mention that no one knows what goes on inside that research lab, hinting that maybe strange experiments go on there. Possibly that's how the vampire blood ended up being given to Sang. It's also possible some vampire donated blood, although it seems unlikely a vampire would donate its blood given that it would turn some random person into a vampire that could expose them. I have thought that maybe the medical staff knew it was vampire blood, and that's why they gave it to him at the last moment, hoping it would save him. I lean more towards it being an accident though. So Sang was turned by having the blood fed directly into his body with an IV tube. Tae-ju was turned by ingesting blood. So in order to be turned, you must consume vampire blood, one way or another. You cannot be turned by a bite. It also appears you must die in order to be fully turned. Sang died in the medical lab and Tae-ju was killed by Sang. I think another bit of evidence that supports this is that Tae-ju cut herself and some of the vampire blood dripped into Miss Ra's drink. This means that Miss Ra ingested vampire blood, but didn't turn. This leads me to believe you have to die to become a vampire, and also means that if Miss Ra dies, she could be turned into a vampire. When they zoomed in and showed a close-up of the blood going into her drink, I really thought that's where they were going with the story. I guess maybe a drop of blood isn't enough to turn someone. When somebody becomes a vampire, their appearance does not change much. They might get a little more pale, but their eyes don't change and they don't grow fangs. It's not exactly clear if these vampires are undead or not. Sang dies on the operating table, but when he comes back it sounds like the heart monitor is beeping, but it's never confirmed if they have a heartbeat. Tae-ju does say something about them already being dead, and also says that Sang's hands are cold to the touch, suggesting they have a lower body temperature. All this leads me to believe they might not have a heartbeat and are technically undead. Abilities and weaknesses. We will start with abilities and strengths first. Sang gained extremely good hearing, sight, smell, super strength, agility, and durability. These vampires have a very impressive healing ability, able to heal from almost any wound aside from being dismembered or burnt by the sun. I think their most impressive ability is the extremely high jumping that is basically flight. Notably, these vampires have no magic-like abilities similar to V-Wars or Underworld. No telepathy, shapeshifting, compulsion, telekinesis, or anything like that. As far as weaknesses, they pretty much have two: not drinking enough blood and sunlight. Not drinking enough blood will cause their EV to return and kill them. And I guess this might not affect a normal vampire without EV, but usually not drinking blood for long enough will kill any vampire, so. And the second thing, of course, sunlight will burn a vampire until they are nothing but ash. Throughout the film, these vampires are not seen being affected by holy objects, which is pretty apparent by the fact that Sang is a priest and regularly interacts with crosses, Bibles, and other things that vampires usually have an aversion to. There's also no mentions of garlic or silver. Overall, I think this movie is one of the most interesting takes on a vampire film, up there with What We Do in the Shadows, Let the Right One In, and a few others. They are vampire movies, but they're not like any other vampire movie out there. It's a totally unique viewing experience. This movie has received high praise from fans and critics alike, and it's not hard to see why. I like the take on the vampire virus, and it being mixed with this other leprosy-like virus called EV. As far as the story goes, it's well thought out and combines drama with comedy and horror in a way I haven't seen before. That's my video on Thirst. I've been wanting to cover this movie for a while and glad I finally got around to it. It's hard for me to rate this movie because it's not my preferred style, but trying to judge it objectively, I would probably give it a 7.5, maybe an 8 out of 10. You will have to put up with subtitles if you want to watch it, but if you haven't seen this movie, I definitely recommend it. Myself, I don't mind subtitle films, but I know it drives some people crazy. So if that's you, I guess you can watch this video instead. If there's any other movies, TV shows, or video games you want me to cover, please leave them in the comments down below. I'm always looking for new ideas, and the comments have helped me find so many amazing series and movies I'd never heard of before. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe for new videos every week. As always, an extra shout out to all my members for supporting the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.